My new thing, it fits in a clock, it rakes in a car, pulls on my brain. Are you ready to see? This is my new thing. Are you ready to see? This thing is my new thing. Shyness will show, excitement will glow. I'm sharing this thing. That thing is my new thing.
Hey folks, it's comedian Dan Wilbur.
And comedian Zach Sims. And what are we listening to, Dan?
Oh, we're listening to My New Thing. You know, you go and tell people, hey, I'm listening to My New Thing. And they're like, what do you mean? And you go, My New Thing.
Sure.
Like, it's yours? It's like the Who joke. The Who? The Who? They're playing?
You mean
get what I'm
who's
saying.
You mean who's on first?
Yeah, they stole it. The Animaniacs stole it.
Sure.
For like, who's this band playing? And they
No,
go,
I
The
know.
Who? Okay.
I know. Well,
you know,
you're trying to
many
speak to the
iterations
millennials
of the same thing. Yes,
Sure.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, the younger demographic. That does come from a time. It is one of those things that comes from a time like before humor was invented. Who's on first? You know, and there are just those certain things. It's like that, and like Tootsie Rolls come from before people knew that things could actually like taste good.
Right,
There's just
right.
a simpler time.
You were saying you wanted to downgrade from obsession. It doesn't have to be an obsession.
Well, I as somebody who doesn't get very obsessed with anything, I wouldn't want to feel left out. So I just, it doesn't have to be, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about, jujubes or whatever.
Right.
It can be, sometimes I kind of like to take a bath.
Right.
Wouldn't
And
you
it
love to have a comedian in here and just spend an hour talking about taking a bath?
I would
oh
love
my
it.
God.
I would love
yeah,
it.
sure.
Helps
sure.
you sleep. You get to picture them. I like to wear a bathing suit when I take a bath.
In the tub, sure.
I like to keep it all tight, all packed in.
Well, you do the full, like the old-timey one-piece kind of
yeah, I do
tank top shorts. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. And then you wash yourself with that stick, that
Right.
kind of back-scratching soap stick.
Clawfoot tub. Mm-hmm. And then whenever I want to say something, a screen shows up and it says it in an old-timey font. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'm in a not in a talkie.
In some ways, that almost set us up perfectly for our shared interest.
Yes.
As I start the process of downgrading. Interest for the week. It's also because I can't come up with a new obsession every week. Jesus Christ.
No, I would love
What
it if
am I?
I had a new obsession. Like
Of
I
course.
can't stop thinking of jujubes because then it would be something you needed to get help for, serious help.
Sure.
If you really couldn't stop thinking about something.
And it would be nice to feel cared for.
Yeah.
People were concerned. Yeah.
You ever do that? You ever fantasize about, what if I had just became completely helpless? That's
Yeah,
what I
every
like
day.
to think about. In the grocery store, I'm like, what if I just told someone I was lost, like a small
Sure.
child? Oh, that'd be nice, just to see if they'd do anything for me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Hold your hand.
That's not what we were obsessing over, though.
I was thinking about making a joke about how that's what I think about orgasm. But I worry because now I know that several moms are listening to the show, which was really the worst thing that could have happened to us.
I mean, the best way to orgasm is when someone's helping you. So I don't know.
Sure, I
Like,
guess that's true.
You don't want to be all alone. They know that.
I guess that's true, yeah. Yeah. I mean, not from my experience, but that's what I've heard. But our shared... Dan, what is our shared interest?
Our shared
this week?
obsession, once again,
Yeah.
is movies. And specifically, I was obsessed this week with the New York Times list of the top 100, but it also happens to be the month when Criterion is selling DVDs at half price at every Barnes & Noble. So that's our shared.
Blu-rays and 4Ks, which I think a 4K, maybe you need the 4K TV to really get the full money. I don't really know.
I can't
what's
find a
going on there.
TV that's not 4K. They're
Oh,
just
wow.
they're
Jeez.
slinging them at people.
What a life
They're
you're
like, "You
living.
want
They are
this?"
cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are cheaper than they used to be. It used to be like, a widescreen, 12-inch widescreen television was $14,000.
Yeah.
Like if you saw one, you were like, oh, your dad must run Monsanto. But now you could be like in a punk band. And, not a good one.
Well, now I think about them in terms of this is how old I'm getting. As I go, now is this screen going to be so good that it gives me a migraine. That's how
Oh.
that's how bad my life's getting. So then I'm like,
Interesting.
now if I play a video game on this, is it going to hurt me? Am I going to watch a movie and there's subtitles on it and the subtitles are so crisp that it burns my irises? So that's where I'm at.
It is, one of those things where sometimes it looks too good, right? It looks almost hyper real.
Yeah, I don't want it to be hyper real.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to see every nook of Doc Brown's, aging or whatever, his age lines.
Especially in
Now-
older movies where there's a lot of animal cruelty. You know what I mean? You're like, don't you want to see
Sure.
this animal
Yeah, you
get
don't need- yeah.
slaughtered?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, you don't need any of that stuff in full. I can't think of the movie where they kill the whale, but you know what I mean. The documentary
Dick?
about the Yes, yeah. Yeah, you don't want to see Ahab's gangrene foot bopping around.
No, thank you.
Queequeg,
Love him.
is that his name?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Love him.
Wow, Queequeg.
I learned this down the street at the Whaling Museum that that was the most integrated job you could have back in the day. Was just,
Interesting.
They were like,
whaling.
we just need people who are willing to die to get a whale, and they didn't care
That
what
is-
race
yeah.
you were. Just you were all equally chum for the sharks.
That is the way that works. Yeah, it's like equality usually comes when it's something that could easily kill you.
Yep.
That is when they're like, yeah, come on,
Right.
come on.
Welcome to Vietnam, they said.
Yeah. Yes. And thank you for saying that. That's what That's what needs to be said. Absolutely. Now, there was a time, New York Times had the list of top 100 movies
Yes.
of the 21st century.
And
and
let me
you-
ask you, how many? What was your number?
Much like college or anything, I guess I feel like I have to lie to save face. I believe it was around 53 to 55, somewhere in the 50s.
So that
Yeah.
is a healthy number. This is
Sure.
the 100 best films of the first quarter century, and
I grew up religious. I wish it's like my sex number too. I grew up religious. I was sheltered. I think all things considered, it's a good number.
I think that's a good number, and
Yeah.
I would tell you the unhealthiest number is the one that I have not seen beaten by any of my friends sharing their number. Is that I got 92 out of 100, which
Oh
is
my God.
really upsetting. I saw it and I was like, I need a hobby.
Now, how many of those did you see in college?
Many of them I saw recently because
really?
of that's why because of Criterion, because of
Yeah.
probably because I subscribe to the New York Times and listen to what they say about movies.
Sure.
And then I used to have a movie podcast with a screenwriter, and he would tell me, he was obsessed with Korean films. So every Korean film that was on there, I checked off the list immediately. So Memories of Murder is on there, and Parasite is the number one. Not to spoil
Do you
it for
think
anyone.
Parasite should be one? Should Parasite be one in your estimation?
I rewatched after reading the book Oil. I rewatched There Will Be Blood, and There Will Be Blood it feels like a horror film, and it's a horror film about how we ended up where we are right now. It's got some of the best performances, and I just think it's a great movie with a social conscience, even though it's a fucking horror film about feral capitalism destroying religion and everything else in its path. And I think that might be the best one.
Also, you don't have to read all this shit. I don't have to read all those words at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, that's right.
It's in the King's English. Which we like. I think those are both good movies. Kind of about, obviously we don't live in Korea, but about kind of modern existence, right? And kind of the have and have not, and all those such things, and how we got here. Honestly, Honora, which I'm not saying should be number one, but it's also very much a movie kind of about the modern world that we find ourselves living in.
Yeah, everyone I've talked to, every woman I've talked to who enjoyed it. Yeah, I've spoken to women that
You can't tell that by this podcast and the guests we've had, but
I'm
we've
trying to
both
fix
spoken
that.
to women.
I'm trying to fix that.
Yeah.
The women in my life who have talked about that movie all say that they relate to it in some capacity, even though it is about a stripper turned prostitute marrying a Russian oligarch, which is, I'm assuming, not all of them have experienced. I'm assuming. Maybe some of them have.
Yeah. I mean, a few, I'm sure, but yeah.
But it is the pain of like having to exploit yourself, and I think everybody, honestly, everybody who lives in a city knows that. Whereas
Well,
I'm
it's
a
also
suburban
even-
coward, and I don't. No one can exploit me. I'm off the grid.
Well, also the outside, the way outside of influence from countries, non-American countries, influencing our world more and more. And I mean the super rich is basically what I'm
Right.
saying. But
Right.
yes, and
Yeah.
that I'm sure will continue to occur.
Now, was that on the? I didn't even remember if that was on the list. It must have
I think
been.
it probably was, but
Right.
I more just was thinking about that in the context of sometimes on the Criterion subreddit, which I enjoy. Honora gets a very I like this band before they were cool thing,
Right.
where people get mad at how much love Honora has gotten. And people were so excited to buy the Criterion where people were like, it was pretty good, but it was not as good as this and that, which is fine, but it's certainly a good movie. It was my favorite movie of the year, but what do I know?
That's the movie snob way.
Would this podcast be better if it was us talking about a different Criterion film every week? You write us in
Honestly.
and let us know. But today, we're talking about something different than cinema. We're talking to a very smart man about very smart things. Mike Kaplan is our guest this week. What do we talk with Mike about, Dan?
Mike is a unique man who's had many obsessions, and I think he's the kind of person that if you held something in front of him for a couple seconds, this makes it sound like he's stupid or something, or like he's like a cat who's playing with keys. But I mean, if you really just talk to Mike, he's so in the moment that whatever you're talking about, he is obsessed with. But he came to tell us about advice columns, and it only takes us 20 minutes to get there. We really just, so sit back and enjoy the ride because we talk about all of Mike's obsessions, current, past, present, and then also advice columns.
And it only takes 40 minutes for you or I to say a word. But it's a great... Mike's great. Mike's very smart and very funny, and it's a wide-ranging conversation. And Mike always says very interesting things. So I think it's definitely a great listen, and we hope you enjoy it right now.
You're like consuming food, and you're like, well, I'm not going to consume an animal. But
You're right.
would
I'm definitely, so I'm not a meat eater, and I'm not a certain kind of media eater as well. I mean, for sure, I definitely think about what goes into my body and my mind.
Right.
I think is the connection you're making. Like, I don't only. I mean, I live in your typical East Coast liberal elitist bubble, but
Sure.
I have, I travel the country. I perform for many audiences full of people who I would say don't live their life exactly the way that I do in many ways. And I get a lot of my news from The Week magazine. Do you know The Week magazine?
Oh,
Perfect comedian magazine, by the way.
I mean, I'm interested in having you say more about that, but just for your listeners or anyone who's not fully versed in what The Week does, it compiles like lots of news. Like obviously there are editorial choices made, but usually like the first page or two is like the big story of the week in, US government, politics, social things, wars, like what, the big news that a lot of the smaller newses are talking about. And I like that they'll always be like, kind of the New York Times said this, the National Review said this, columnists and editorials said this, and they kind of, offer varying perspectives, and then at the end they're like, and here's what we say, maybe it wasn't all this or that or good or bad. And then they do that for US, they do it for world, they do it for science and entertainment and, society and culture. And like every page or a couple pages, there's just like, it's very comprehensive and I think very, thorough and measured as like a, just like a survey course of the news of the week. So I definitely, I'm also on social media. I see your, I follow a lot of progressive people, and sometimes they are dunking on less progressive people in ways. And, so I do my best to, here's the thing that I read recently. There was a study done, there's lots of studies that show how harmful the effects of like technology can be in certain situations. Like, let's say for children. So years ago, I saw that I heard about a study that it's not just that iPads or whatever are bad for kids. It's about what they're watching, like what media is going into them. Like if you're just plopping them down in front of it as a parent and not sort of curating their experience, that can be more harmful than being like, oh, let's watch Sesame Street together. Let's watch Blue's Clues. Let's watch something, educational and sort of engaging and entertaining, and age appropriate. And so I saw a recent study showed, I think they studied 8,000 11 to 13-year-olds to find out whether smartphones are good, bad, other. And I read not the whole thing, but the summary at the beginning. And they're like, we found, among other things, that smartphones are a net positive for children. But I think it was posting on social media is a net negative, or it might have been social media in general, but definitely I feel like I remember it saying posting on social media. And
Interesting.
So I definitely find myself, I really, the social media platform that really gets me the most, I was never, when I was, on Twitter a lot or on Facebook a lot, sometimes I would spend a lot of time on Facebook, going back and forth with people in the comments, of my posts or whatever. But these days, I mostly I post a joke, I post an idea, and sometimes I don't even look at it again for weeks or months or ever. But Threads is the one that gets me the most. I'm like, oh, I get a lot of engagement sometimes, and sometimes people are saying nice, fun, creative, other good things, and then sometimes the opposite of that. And I usually do my best now. Yes.
I like when they're saying, is this a joke, essentially, because they just respond at face value. Every single person on Threads is like, I can't tell if you're joking and comedy's in your name or whatever.
There is a Threads account called TUNGI. I don't know if they pronounce it Tungi or Tungi, but it stands for Threads Users Not Getting It. And they just post screenshots of somebody puts what is to a reasonable person, the reasonable person in the law. That's what things are often based on. What would a reasonable person think about this? To a reasonable person, a joke has occurred. If you have all of the ingredients of the news of the day, and I think one I just saw recently is something about, RFK said something about how autistic people, we need to get rid of, we need to prevent autism because autistic people aren't contributing members to society. They don't even they don't pay their taxes. And I've seen almost everybody I follow is like, man, I wish they told me that before tax day. Because, and people are like, oh, what about Zuckerberg and Elon? I mean, yeah, they're not paying taxes, but they should be. And all of these things. So somebody probably put a joke that was like, I'm so glad to hear that RFK said that autistic people don't have to pay taxes. Yeah. And somebody writes back, that's not actually what he said. What he said was, and, the actual news story that the joke is based on. And I feel like this goes back, it's not just social media, but my own joke making experience in life. I haven't always known my audience, and maybe I still don't. But I think you'll understand this. Do you ever make a joke and then somebody doesn't understand it, and then it seems like you're dumb? Here's the most basic example. You look out the window and it's pouring rain, and you say to somebody, beautiful weather, huh? And then they say, no, it's raining.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh,
Threads.
I was
the Threads experience.
Never mind. But yeah, so Threads, I can find myself I could scroll endlessly on it, and I'm glad every time I'm not scrolling endlessly on it, I feel proud of myself, and I'm doing something good for my mental health. Even though there are so many funny, intelligent, interesting people on there posting things like yourselves. So I do my best to have a healthy, balanced diet. Look, you can have a beach read once in a while. You can have a bag of chips here and there. Like I don't want it to be the whole of my diet. But
I want to carry this metaphor as far as it can go. So Twitter,
you can eat a pie,
potato chips. Yeah. Facebook is because it's mostly made up of our parents. That's a good home cooked meal that was accidentally burnt or something, or undercooked. Actually, undercooked. That's what they do.
What's Substack?
Media.
Do Substack.
Substack's oh my God, Substack is sustaining, a sliver of salmon and quinoa, like just whatever the healthiest protein. But also you get mercury poisoning from it, and it's bad for the world, for everyone to have a Substack. So
I
count that as
I had my best ever social media reaction or interaction on Facebook. I'm going to say 2 weeks ago. I did not to brag, I did a Zoom show. And
what?
They're still out there. It's still 2020 somewhere, my man.
Who books that? I like doing Zoom shows. Yeah,
I'll give you the information afterwards. Honestly, it's a fun show. It's the audience is the people you would expect to be at just a quick example. I referenced the Avengers at one point, and I realized right when I did it, I said, I should have said A-Team, just to give you a little bit of an idea of the generation.
The Avengers team, yeah.
But after like a few days went by, and I checked my Facebook, and I got a message from an elderly gentleman, and who was at the show or watching the show, and all he did was he just listed every single one of my punchlines verbatim, 10 to 15, and then said, "I love the show," and I was like, "Oh, that was great!
Wow.
What a great!" He took thorough notes and then had a compliment.
I'm sorry.
It's like the week.
Touchy reaction that RFK said no one his age has autism, and I'm sorry, but that Facebook post proves him wrong. Okay, all right. Come on. Anyway, the week I was saying, to go back, I think it is a comedian's newspaper because I had this conversation with a comic who, not to brag, but I knew some of the writers at The Daily Show 20 years ago. And
wow.
I was trying to impress as a little college boy, saying, they said, "What newspapers do you read?" They were like genuinely interested because they wanted to know what young comics were reading. And they thought, little stoned comedian, he's going to say he reads Facebook and that's it. And I was like, "Well, I read the New York Times." And then he was like, "Well, you should start reading the Post so that your news is in pun form." And I thought this was Rory Albany is telling me this. Make sure your news is in pun form. And I subscribed to The Week immediately because The Week gave you almost like single sentences that you could then turn into SNL Weekend Update type premises. And that's all the information you need to write like a really good short tweet, at least. And then you need a Times article if you're actually going to have an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm actually going to have a take.
Learn the information.
The information.
You will need more than the headline. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm just trying to make a pun about, them finding seaweed on a planet 120 light years away, I just want the information that they found life, sort of, and then, you just need that single sentence. I don't need all the information about how they figured it out. I just need to know. Yeah.
Seaweed in space, smoke weed in space. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
That's the stuff. I can't remember. There was one that was like, scientists get really intimate photos of the moon, and I was like, I hope they deleted them right after for the privacy of the moon. And like, it was in The Week, and I was like, that's perfect. That's just
that
a
must have
perfect
just
little.
The cloud burst, that was somebody hacked the moon's socials. Yeah,
it's a real fappening situation.
That's the one. That's the
Fappening.
one. We're getting it. We're getting it. Sometimes that's all you need. People know what the moon is. I don't need any more information about the moon. I know that scientists do. Maybe they want to study those rocks, but I see it. I see it every day or night.
Man, sometimes both, and you're like, wait, hey, well, you're not supposed to be here. It's like a teacher at the grocery store.
Yeah.
The moon during the day. But when you said we all know what the moon is, like 100%, I agree. And also, like, I would love to do like a person on the street interview series. Be like, what is the moon? Like, if you had to answer, what is the moon? Like, a satellite made of rock? Am I close?
Yeah.
Like,
That's pretty close.
yeah.
Well, it hit us, and then it knocked us off kilter. I know this now, and that's what gives us the seasons. It was just like a perfect little. It was like a big asteroid that hit us early. I don't know if it's an asteroid. See, I'm already making mistakes. But we got hit by the moon, and that's why we have seasons. That's all I know.
Wow.
And then it
now
stuck
it controls,
around.
the
Lingered.
tides and werewolves.
Yeah.
Those are the
and women's feelings. Okay, I don't know if that is that true.
No, that's true. That is true.
Cycle. Okay,
the moonstrel cycle. That's why they call it that.
now this is a perfect way to transition, I think, since we were talking about the Week magazine. That your first obsession, before we talk about your big obsession,
My newest
is
one, right? My
your newest
earliest
one.
one. Yeah.
We'll talk about your earliest one. We'll talk about your latest one. But for right now, I just wanted to briefly hear about why you're obsessed with advice columns.
Of course. So I honestly, I don't know why, but that won't stop me from speculating for the next hour or so. So I'll bring us back to, like, when I was a child. The parts of the paper that I read, the Newark Star Ledger in northern New Jersey, where I lived, was like the paper of record. Probably they don't sue the Star Ledger. They didn't say that. New York Times, don't sue the Star Ledger. The section of the paper I would read would include, like, the TV Times, of course, but the comics, the comic strips. The horoscopes, which were kind of either on the same page or opposite. And then right by the horoscopes was, like, Dear Abby and Ann Landers, I think. So that was, like, my introduction. They're like the OGs, of advice columns. And then, so that was just, like, that was there. I read them. They seemed cool, whatever. But, like, the first one that I really got into, like, as an almost adult was in college in Boston, the Boston Phoenix, which was kind of like the Village Voice of Boston at the time. The Stranger in Seattle of Boston. Like an alternative, a cool newspaper, man. Like,
Sure.
I first learned about Neil Hamburger, the comedian or the anti-comedian in this. I was like, oh, cool. Like, cool news. Cool news, bro.
No sports. No sports. It's the only Boston magazine. I'm just
could be
picturing,
right.
like, I'm trying to picture a Village Voice that
Only
Boston would
ultimate
actually
frisbee.
read.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All disc golf. Yeah. So they had Dan Savage's Savage Love column.
Oh, yeah.
That I think he started doing in the early 90s. And I was in college starting in 1996. So it was, syndicated in papers like this around the country. And has since, obviously, like, he has grown in popularity. He has had a podcast for probably close to the past 20 years now, called the Savage Lovecast. But yeah,
We don't plug
his
other
column,
podcasts, Mike.
yeah. Oh, I'm just the column, just a newspaper column. You can only a dead media. So, like, his column was, he started it because he's a gay man and there weren't really any queer voices in advice giving. In fact, most of the time when gay people would write in to, like, Dear Abby or Ann Landers back in the day, they would get, like, kind of very, like, unhelpful, dismissive, sort of heterosexist advice. And so he's like, he started the column with the idea of, like, I'm going to treat straight people with the same disdain that straight advice columnists treat gay people. But then people actually started asking him real questions, taking him seriously. And he's like, oh, I guess. I mean, he says this sometimes when people are like, what gives you the right or the credibility? Like, why should you have an advice column? And he always says something like, if you look it up in the dictionary, advice is just, thoughts on what a person should or should not do, like, if asked. Like, all you need to be qualified to give advice is somebody asks you for advice. Like, and I think I like that over the years, he has grown and changed. Like, there are things that he has said that both, like, inform and function. Like, he probably, used to be, like, bisexuality doesn't exist. Like, that it's always just a phase on the way to coming out, which is, like, a myth that was perpetuated for a long time, and some people might still believe, because there are gay people who did identify as bi on their way to coming out, and there are also bi people who don't come out. Like, there's probably bisexuals, I think, are the largest chunk. Bisexuals or pansexuals are the largest chunk of queer people, but so many of them end up in, because of the numbers, relationships with with a different gender as opposed to the same gender, and monogamy is still, sort of one of I think the largest, common structure for
the
relationships.
largest cult. Is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you're
yeah,
trying
exactly.
To say. Yes,
Yeah,
the
I'm so
largest
sorry. Yeah,
cult. Now, I just want to say, finger on the pulse, before, and I don't want to get you off track. Somebody at our show 2 nights ago said, "Is anyone here bi?" And only one guy went, "Woo!" And so we were like, "Well, it's one in about 50." So if we're going by our stats, that's just my little
Absolutely.
understanding of how many bi men there are.
Yeah, I mean,
open bi men.
So the reason that I loved the column to begin with was, I mean, it was a sex and relationship advice column. It was also about politics at times, often, like, sex and politics are connected. And now Dan has an extra podcast that comes out for subscribers called Sex and Politics. Look, I'm so sorry. You're not supposed to talk about other podcasts. Anyway, I have my own newspaper that I put out audio-wise every week as well. But yeah, I think Dan is funny and informative and, smart and finger on the pulse, to use a term that I've heard people say recently. I don't know where. And so that was one that, So the question of, like, why am I into advice columns? That was one. And then I also liked Dear Abby and Ann Landers. Eventually I think the next one I really found was Dear Prudence in Slate. And there have been, like, many different people who've been the Dear Prudence over the years. And then I think I forget the order of this all, but I found one that's in print called Captain Awkward, which is like a super long form one. Like, people write questions, and then, like, there's like a real, like, sometimes advice columns like Ann Landers or Dear Abby I still read every day, and they're just so short as to be like, I can't imagine that this is helpful or accurate as much as it could be when, so it was like, well, if it's this, then that, or this, then that. Or, like, one of the best advice purveyors that I know, there's a podcast called, I'm so sorry, Zach, Dear Therapists. I don't know if they're still making it. There haven't been new ones in a while, but there's like 4 seasons of it. Dear Therapists, Guy and Lori are 2, professional therapists, and when somebody calls in with a question, they get them on like a Zoom call or whatever, and they have, like, a therapy session with them, basically, for entertainment purposes more than medicinal.
Oh, well, I was just about to say that I would really love it. That sounds a lot cheaper than what I do. So proceed.
I mean, it is 100% like
free therapy.
I think they say, like, that, legally speaking, like, this is technically not therapy.
Right.
We are doing this for entertainment. But aside from that, as a lay person viewing it, I'm like, the people seem like they really glean some solid, like, advice, not just, like, symptoms being treated, but actual, like, sometimes they call in about one thing and then it gets down to, like, their family dynamic or childhood traumas or the actual reason behind the question that they're asking, and they give them homework, and, like, then they check back with them sometimes a year later. It's like, and they have a real conversation where they ask questions and they don't just have the text that was sent in or the call. Like, they actually interact with a real human being. And so that's one. I really like The Ethicist in the New York Times. Oh, one of my favorites now is Social Cues in the New York Times by, I think,
So
Philip
much
Galan.
advice. Have you applied any of this advice to your life? Do you have time when you're not reading advice columns to exist?
Great question. I mean, look, a lot of them come out once a week, so and some of them come out every day, but the ones that come out every day are much shorter. So it would be really interesting for me to, maybe I will take like a month or a week or a couple weeks period, because some of them come out bi-weekly now. They come out as bi-weekly now.
They come out as bi-weekly.
Yeah. Hey, how many bi-weekly podcasts do we have here? How many bi-weekly columns? Yeah. Oh, we got a few.
You're lying to yourself.
And I wonder how much time I do spend, in an average week reading, engaging with such podcasts and columns. This is all to say, I do think that the underlying reason that I respond to them so much, that I like them so much, one reason for certain is here's a couple of reasons. I have the inclination to, if somebody tells me they have a problem or they have something they're dealing with, I almost always, my initial reaction internally will almost always be, well, here's what you should do. This is what you should do. I have and a lot of people, not everyone's like this, but I know a lot of us are oh yeah, it's much easier to see somebody else's issues, and potentially come up with solutions from the outside. Oh, the answer is simple. You just do this. And they're like, but that sounds like it's going to be really hard. But it's not hard for me to say it,
That's why I always love the advice is, what would you tell yourself? And then when I think about that, I'm like, oh, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that.
And I also now know that there's sometimes when people share a challenge, a friend or a family member or a loved one comes to me and they're like, this thing happened. Here's a couple framings that I like to offer to myself and anyone who wishes. Is the person looking for a coach, a cheerleader, or silence? Sometimes they just want, or do you want to be hugged, helped, or heard? Do you want support in the form of just being seen, being received? Do you actually want, practical help, suggestions as to what to do? Or is it just enough for you? So those are the three framings, or the two framings of those three things that I find valuable. So what I like about advice columns and advice podcasts is that a person is asking for actual, practical, actionable information. Here's a problem. It's really actually interesting when sometimes people write in and they lay a bunch of stuff out and they're like, what do you think? And it's that's an interesting way to frame the question. Because often when a person is writing in, they want somebody else to change, and the answer is often you can't. You can't change them. So and there's always sort of oh, what should my friend do in this situation? Well, if your friend was writing to me, I'd tell them this. But for you, I'd tell you to mind your own business. Leave them alone. If you think your friend should go to therapy, you can't make them go to therapy. But who you can make go to therapy? You. Yeah.
That was the famous, my friend is trying to blow up a federal building. And they said, listen, you can't control what other people do. Don't tell anyone this, is what they said. Wait, I have a question just to pause.
Course.
This is a question for both of you. And Mike, you can start because I feel like maybe you have an idea. Oh, I just want to bring you into the conversation.
Oh, you want to bring me in? Thank you so much. Yeah,
let's all bring it. I'm happy to sit back. Has there been anything in an advice column that you found personally very rewarding? And I want to say before you answer that I actually do have an answer, and it's Dan Savage.
I'd love to hear your answer.
Okay, you think about it, and I'm going to tell you that this is... I was, in the 90s, a little younger, and Dan Savage had a piece that my friend handed to me, and he's like, I can't believe this. And it was a person asking, and I feel like Dan Savage was the only person who would have gotten this question and was equipped to answer it. And it was, when I poop, the water splashes up into my butt. And Dan Savage, could you help me with this poop issue? And he had a really long, funny answer where he just talked about poop for a little bit, which was great, and butts. And who doesn't love a little butt chat? That's what we're changing. We're going to change this podcast to that. And he was like, you take a couple pieces of toilet paper and you make just a little layer on the toilet water, and you won't have that problem anymore. And now, I don't do it every time, but when I'm I feel like this one's going to do some splashing.
How many trees have you killed? Just to prevent a little splash?
I'm just saying, if it really annoys you, if you live in a cold climate where your toilet water is freezing, which I don't, so it's okay. What I'm trying to say is that every time I poop, I think of Dan Savage, and I hope he knows that. So that's just a little piece of advice that I got, and it stuck with me.
Beautiful. I'll say, before I answer your question specifically, which I may not do. I mean, the answer
Great.
is, in general, probably. But here's the reason that none spring to mind immediately, because I think when a thing like that happens, like when something like strikes me as like resonant and relevant to my life, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna start living like that, I feel like it just like I subsume it, or it subsumes me, and then it becomes as though I've just always been that way. I've always done that. Like, for example, I don't remember when I first learned, I mean, here's an example I already gave. When I first learned about the framing of do you want a coach or a cheerleader, like that was eye-opening to me. To the idea that, I mean, this goes back to like White Men Can't Jump. Do you guys remember?
Yeah.
There's a scene in White Men Can't Jump where Rosie Perez and Woody Harrelson are in bed together, and she says, "I'm thirsty," and he says, "Well, then I'll go get you a glass of water." And she says something like, in like, you know, the classic, what has become a stereotype, a trope. But she's like, no, I just want you to like hear me and understand like my suffering, that I'm thirsty. Like, I don't want you to just solve the problem. I want you to be here with me. And he's like, so you don't want water? You know, like,
Yes.
But so that, I remember that seemed like, to me
I,
as a
too,
child, when I
have been
saw
thirsty.
that, it seemed really funny because it seemed like in that, my sort of black and white framing of it, and black and white comes into that movie in a different way elsewhere. But in my, you know, like just sort of like in my original, I think now, like less nuanced thinking of it, I was like, well, this problem for sure, you want water, right? You want water solves the problem of I'm thirsty. This one 100%, and like I would have probably been broken up with if I, you know, if I was like, no, come on, like for real, I understand. Yes, of course. Listen, be there with, of course, yeah, I get it. Demonstrating that I didn't get it. I didn't get it, and so when I like the framing, and I'm probably, you know, gradual changes over the years, but I feel like learning about coaching versus cheerleading, and that somebody truly, even if you think you know exactly what they should do, if they are not asking you, what should I do, then like often the best thing to do is to not tell them what to do, or to, you know, listen them down to zero is another one that I've heard. I think that one's great.
Well, that one sounds like you're trying to fight them. Instead of taunting them, you're just like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to kill them with kindness by listening until they die.
I think that your number one funny joke, recognized, and
Finally,
the expression "kill them with kindness," I think does have a kindred nature to this concept, because kill them with kindness doesn't literally mean kill them. And listen them down to zero doesn't mean listen to them until they have wasted away to nothing. But
let me just go and post "kill them with kindness" on threads and see how many people come back and be like, you know, killing is wrong. Anyway.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I really think that listen them down to nothing is like when somebody, especially if somebody is experiencing a challenge in your life and they share it with you, like even before jumping in to be like, so are you looking for a cheerleader? Are you looking for a coach? That could be a helpful thing to ask, to be like, you know, to ask follow-up questions, to be like, is there anything else about this situation? Is there anything more? And like sometimes that'll like dislodge, you know, like when you got like ice in a cup and you're like, oh, let me just hit the end. Oh yeah, there's a little more in there. We got a little more to come out. And that'll be helpful for them, to get them to be heard more, and it'll give you more information to help them if they want help from you in a specific way. And that reminds me also of a book, You're Not Listening, which is not an advice column per se, but is like in the grander family of like helping people. Like I read You're Not Listening because my girlfriend recommended it to me, and I know that sounds like a joke as well. She's like, you could really benefit from this. You're not listening. But it's about how we all could be better listeners, and like we often, even the things that we hear, like the common advice, like is really to like perform listening in a way, and like mirror it back. Like I hear you saying this, and like not that those are necessarily negative things, but that if you are actually listening. You do not have to perform listening because you are actually doing the listening. You are listening to the person, you are hearing the person, and then you can respond to the person if you're having a conversation with the person, etc. So I think that book like helped me like in a lightning bolt shifting kind of way. But yeah, these are all sort of in the general family of learning to be a better listener, which I have gotten from, if not advice column adjacent situations.
Zach, did you ever read an advice column that you liked?
No. What if that's all I said? That'd be fun. I was thinking, I like the ethicist a little bit, to be honest, but I was thinking that some of the most advice I've realized that like dating advice, I've gotten a lot from literally just watching women do stand-up. Like just the amount of times that I learned like, oh, maybe I keep my opinions on The Godfather to myself on a first date. It seems like women don't really enjoy that. Or I'm not a huge music guy, but like I'm not going to ask her about a bassist or whatever right. Unless it comes up. But also, I was going to say thanks to White Men Can't Jump, I've never offered my girlfriend water ever once. And
No,
she's really
in her
appreciated
face.
it.
I don't know if that's the right message.
She's very thin.
Well, there you go.
My wife does a very good Rosie impression, so she has said that whole monologue to me multiple times,
That's cool.
like as a bit.
Are you not because she was thirsty. Okay, that's good. Yeah, she's just
She'll just say it. It's fun.
Now,
So,
Mike, let me ask you this real quick, Mike. Just for the advice columnist, is there an aspect to this, and I'm going to guess no, but maybe, is there an aspect to this that you a little bit of a people watching, a little bit of sometimes a crazy life experience somebody's going through? I'm not going to say a full car wash or car crash observing, but is there something to the absurdity of the human experience and kind of observing that appeals to you as well?
Great question, number one. Also, I love the idea of car wash rubbernecking. But
What a clean.
pretty fun. Yeah. What a clean. Joke received and appreciated. One for each of you. That's just a particle among the waves of comedy that have been just I've been basking in the whole time.
Of course.
I would say like short answer. I would say like intellectually, aspirationally, no, but absolutely like sometimes one of my favorite experiences of reading an advice column is somebody writes in who does not realize that, look, if anyone is the villain, and I honestly think there are, on a universal, ultimate level, no villains. Every person that you think could be a villain was a child, was a baby, had things happen to them that they weren't in control of, their genetics, their environment, they weren't in, even if they're a sociopath, they didn't choose to become a sociopath. Everyone who's hurting anyone didn't choose. Hurt people, and it doesn't mean I'm advocating it or condoning it. Like, obviously, protect victims, protect yourselves. But in this framing where that's like to zoom out, there are no villains. And zooming in, sometimes in an advice column, a person writing in doesn't realize that in the context of the situation they're presenting, they are 100% unambiguously the villain. They're like, this thing happened at a wedding, or this is about to happen, or like a lot of wedding questions in advice columns. Like there's really artificial like situations. Shouldn't it be this? People have different expectations, different ideas of what is supposed to be compared to what is. And so one of my favorite ways that goes is somebody tells their whole story. They're like, shouldn't it be this? And then like the answer, like, compassionately and, like meticulously like takes apart every, like really introduces the person to the fact that their perspective is skewed in a way that is super satisfying to that, like, oh my God, like somebody's really getting their comeuppance in a way like that. Like Lori Kilmartin posted something a long time ago. I don't know if she innovated this, but I think about it a lot. And it's, I hope you all get what you deserve. And like just a beautiful Zen koan of a wish. And in some ways we do, because, you know, in a Buddhist concept of karma is simply your doing, like gravity. Like you throw a ball in the air, it doesn't come down because it deserves to come down. It comes down just because that's what happens when you throw it up. And like the same way that, have you heard, you're not punished for your anger, you're punished by your anger. It doesn't feel good to...
Oh, yes.
Like, I mean, sometimes it feels like it feels good. And like, I'm not an expert. I'm not a divinely enlightened, omniscient Buddha myself yet, that I know of. I don't know everything that I know of. But
The opposite, inverted Socrates.
The only thing I know is that I know everything.
That I know everything. I think.
Yeah.
Everything I need to know.
But yeah, so to answer your question, to make a long story longer, Zach, yeah, definitely there are elements in it of like, oh wow, like I can't believe this person is being that way, which is also, you know, an informative, helpful way we can learn from other people's mistakes as well as our own. So not just the good advice, but like, oh yeah, don't do that, you know, or don't, if this happens, try considering this or asking this question. Yeah, I try not to live too much in the mental headspace of, you know, similar to the not taking in too much social media, like the gossipy, can you believe what this person did? I cannot because then I feel like, you know, it's like a pendulum. Like I don't want to get too far into the direction, like fall off a cliff and into an unhealthy place myself where I'm, you know, being super judgmental in a way that doesn't serve me or anyone. But, you know, just a tiny dash of it once in a while is a nice spice.
That reminds me of the Schadenfreude, I think, that is being asked of people on the Reddit "Am I the Asshole?", which is almost advice, but it's more like,
in the world, yeah.
Here's I'm a villain, and so is the person I was interacting with. Which one of us is the villain? And then everyone being like, "You're both villains. I hate
it's like,
this."
Yeah. The scene in The Princess Bride where is the poison in front of you or is it in front of me? Yeah.
And so I was just thinking that, but I do have this theory that because I go into therapy and it's just my side of every interaction I've had, that I'm basically going to tell a professional, licensed professional, a long "Am I the Asshole?" post, and then at the end, no, you're not the asshole, and then I leave, and then I get to feel good.
Great.
So
do you know,
like seeing a priest?
My dream, before I ever went to therapy, my idea of therapy, my optimal, like my hope for it, would be that I would go to the therapist, I would tell them everything about my life, everything that I was thinking and feeling, and have them say, "That's about right." Just like A
Good
plus.
job.
Like, yeah,
Hey,
no
good
notes.
work,
Yeah.
Yeah, don't work on anything. Did you have an obsession, maybe as early as childhood, that you have since ditched, or an obsession that like changed your life, and you no longer, because you were talking about subsuming everything that you've ever obsessed over. Is there anything? Were you ever into Pogs and then threw them out and then?
Great question.
I hope it's deeper than
Yeah.
that. But,
Haha. Before I answer that question, let me just button up the topic of advice in a way, like to answer your question of why I'm into them so much. I do think that the spirit of my interest in them is that people are seeking help and people are providing help, and
Right.
that is. I think that is beautiful, and that, you know, it happens in like I learn new things, interesting ways, you know, like ways of things being presented, funny often, you know, things that I never thought about. It's like new and fun, but yeah, at the core, it's that, I mean, we are all, you know, until we are all divinely enlightened, omniscient Buddhas, like we're all struggling to figure things out and grow and improve and learn and work on things and fix things, like the idea that going to therapy should just be to get a good grade. So that is, I think, I don't know why I'm obsessed with it as such, because obviously everyone who's trying to help themselves or help others doesn't necessarily do it by way of advice columns, but I found them early. I imprinted on them, and then I found like good ones, in my teenage to like while my brain was, sort of cooking. And I was like, oh yeah, so that's who I am. I like advice columns. And I will answer the question to what I did give up. I would say I was like an avid collector of certain things as a child. For example, baseball cards. Which I didn't particularly love baseball, but I was, I was assigned boy, and people were like, boys like baseball, and I was like, okay. And, I've been kind of, a completist in ways, and it's like, okay, then I'll collect the baseball cards. And then I really enjoyed that, like, Marvel comic book playing cards as well, and they had, Garbage Pail Kids I had, and, like, a lot of different kinds of cards. Alf cards they had. I was really into Alf for a while, and like a friend of mine and like my best friend as a child, we loved Alf and Gremlins, and we would draw. I drew a lot as a child, and I don't draw as much anymore, and I might get back into it. I got a book from the library about drawing, and our friend Liz Glazer got this book, and we're like, we have plans to go through this book of it's like left brain, right brain, some kind of, a helpful, spiritual, practical, get into drawing again or for the first time. But yeah, I remember all of those cards, all of those collections, like they were meaningful to me in ways, like it felt good to have them. And like my Garbage Pail Kids, I actually had in a shoebox and brought them to my synagogue one week and left them there accidentally, and probably appropriately somebody threw them in the garbage and garbage pail. And I was like, no, you got to be kidding. And I was so sad. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh, it'd be interesting to have those, but I don't care. And I'm, an aspiring minimalist more, want only the things in life that bring joy. But yeah, I think I also collected comics, which I still do read a lot of comics. I don't collect them as much anymore. In fact, I get them mostly from the library, and like I get them in me, and then I get rid of them. But I still have a lot of ones that like I loved, and that I like to revisit once in a while. Yes, Dan.
I just love the idea of you collect. You're like, I still collect things in the mind.
Yeah, I mean, that is
what the library is for.
That is the thing. And so, but here's the thing. As a child, I think one of the first comic books, I read Archie comics for a long time. Loved Archie. And still do. And then the first like Marvel comic I think I bought was, do you guys know Secret Wars?
Mm-hmm. No. I've heard of it.
In like 1984-ish, give or take a year, it was like a big crossover event. Where the storyline was like just a 12-issue limited series where all of the main Marvel characters like Spider-Man, Hulk, the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and then all of their like main villains were like basically zapped away from Earth and onto a battle planet where they didn't know why, but there was like a godlike being called the Beyonder and was like, fight, and it was just like as a kid, I just saw the cover of issue 1 in like a comic book story. I'm a kid in like the 90s. And so this is like a back issue. And I was like, oh my God, this is everyone. I can collect them all in one book. It's one right here. Incredible. And so I got that. I think like my uncle had taken me to the store, like on just a day out of uncle and child, and I got that book and and then I started collecting Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I started collecting X-Men, and I almost never enjoyed it. But I was like, I think I am supposed to. I think I'm supposed. It's like the cool comic book. But there's like now I know. There are talented creators, writers, and artists who are my flavor and who are less my flavor. And like now I mostly buy things based on get things from the library based on who the writer is, because all the artists are generally pretty awesome. Like if the art is distractingly not to my taste, then maybe I won't get it. But mostly the writers that I love work with cool artists, and I won't just get something because I can look at a painting if I want to look at just art without a story, but I would love an awesome story with fine art rather than a fine story with awesome art.
Yes.
And so I started reading, and now I read only, things that I think I will enjoy, as opposed to getting a stack every Wednesday and then ordering them. I would put them in order of like the thing that I thought I would enjoy the least to finally like reward myself with the dessert of the ones that I thought I would enjoy the most. Then I would swap the order.
Sounds like torture.
After I read that, and so eventually now, I mean, I kind of do a similar thing where I go to the library. You can take out in the New York public library system up to 50 books at a time. And so now I have almost 50 books out, and some of them I've had out. They let you keep them. If somebody else doesn't want them, you can keep renewing them indefinitely, basically. And so I have a bunch that I got out, months ago that I'm like, I'll get to it because I've got other books that I'm like, oh, now I'm going to read this one. Now I'm going to read this one now. And so I'm doing it in the right order. I'm like, I know I'm probably going to die someday. Probably. I don't know. But like, I don't want to save the best one for last because what if I don't get to the last? So now I just read the ones immediately that I think I'm going to enjoy the most, the thing that I'm going to have the most meaningful experiences with, which means that when I was a child, I was doing the opposite, and I was getting comics that I thought I was supposed to enjoy prescriptively rather than just deciding what I enjoyed descriptively. I started listening to my insides instead of what, the culture, society, like the cool kids. And so that, I would say, reading comic books and that I didn't specifically enjoy a lot, and collecting cards, which I almost never really enjoyed as much as taking in, a story. I like the comic book ones more than baseball cards. I'm like, what's the story with this baseball guy? Who cares? But yeah, that's what I think I've abandoned.
Now I understand the impulse to collect weird cards. My favorite place in Cleveland was a place called Big Fun that sold old vintage stuff, and I found a place on Long Island, just to plug Long Island and new obsessions, that you should go to. It's the Levittown Flea Market. It's dirty. The escalators don't work.
Oh, yeah.
Reminds me of Cleveland in so many ways. And you go in there, and there's a section for video games, there's a section of old clocks, and then there is one long section of baseball cards or trading cards. And they had signed by all four Golden Girls baseball card, and it was sitting like framed. It had its own like base, like it was a trophy, and it was like $300. And I saw it, and I wanted it. I could feel it inside me that I was like, you know what? I get why people collect stuff, because that's great. I want all the signatures on a baseball card.
Do you want to hear? That's awesome. Number one, and that reminds me of a really fun experience I had in Milwaukee like a year or two ago. I did a show, and a guy came up to me afterwards and like, I have a book that I made with my friend Ramin Nazer, and I sell posters sometimes, and I have CDs, like, physical artifacts that you can have and that I'm happy to sign if you buy one. A guy, and if you bring something and you want me to sign your ticket or another thing. Yeah.
No, you should sign it and keep it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, hey, don't buy this. Don't buy this.
Yeah. Just watch me sign it. Have me collect the experience in your mind.
Imagine you own this.
And oh man, I have so many more things to say about that, about what you just said. But this story, I'll end this story real quick. A guy came up to me at the Laughing Tap, a really fun comedy club in Milwaukee, and he said, "I'm a fan of yours, and I would love to get your signature, your autograph." And I said, I'm happy to supply that. Where would you like me to sign? What would you like me to sign? And he says, this baseball, a literal baseball. Wow. And just for your listeners, I don't know if you've done an intro or how much people are aware of who your guests are. Maybe you mostly talk to baseball players. I'm not a baseball player. I'm not a professional baseball player. If it's clear from my saying that baseball cards weren't really my thing, I played Little League. I played a little, I played a little bit. I'm not a baseball player. I have no specific connection to baseball. So I was like, why do you want me to sign this baseball? And he said, oh, it's just easier to display. It's like, and I was like, that's incredible. And I said, do you have a lot of baseballs signed by non-baseball players? And he said, you are the second. And do you want to, I entertain, you don't have to, but if you want to make any guesses, the other person that has signed a baseball that he displays in his home is a comedian. And I can give you hints if you want.
I was going to go Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But
no, that's what a great guess. Feel free to make as many guesses, but it is. I'll center you in. It's a comedian. Me and this other person, and if you want to just start guessing, I'll give you hints as you go. Here's another hint. They're not alive anymore.
Kevin Hart. Is Kevin Hart alive?
Kevin Hart is alive, but that is a good guess in a specific way.
Oh. Is it a short person who's dead?
No, but he does share another characteristic with Kevin Hart.
Well, I don't know what other
dead.
characteristic that could be.
What's going on?
Okay. It's not. It can't be Richard Pryor because he died way too long ago.
That's correct.
I'm gonna go
Bernie Mac.
Bernie Mac is
Bernie Mac.
100% right.
Bernie
Yes!
Mac's a good guess.
Yeah.
Bernie
ain't
Mac
scared of
though
you,
played a
motherfuckers.
baseball player. Bernie Mac played a
did,
baseball
it
player in
makes
Mr. 3000.
More sense for that one.
Yes. And I think he played for the Brewers in that film. I believe. Not. I could be wrong, but I think so.
Wow.
I know,
I'll take
yeah.
it.
You don't understand.
Yeah, sure.
I
know
ain't
nothing.
scared of you motherfuckers. Okay, that was it. I
Yeah.
just wanted to do it once.
You did a good job, and I'm glad you're not scared. And the thing that you just said about the joke, the wonderful joke that you made about a person getting my autograph but not taking it with them, only just like imagining it, just having it mentally, collecting it in your mind. There's a time when like I probably own now hundreds of books, and I in the past have owned thousands of books. And like sometimes I give them away, sometimes I sell them to like the Strand or the Harvard Bookstore.
I came to your apartment and I took like 10 books. I took a bag of books
when
from your
I was
apartment.
moving from a bigger, like a 2-bedroom that I shared with a person to a smaller apartment at one point, and just didn't have an extra room for books. So I gave a bunch away, including to you. You can confirm this story. You already
Yes.
have. There was a book that I got as a gift and I was like, oh, like I don't really. It was a birthday gift from a comedian friend, and I was really, he was like not even one of my closest friends, but he was like, that's your birthday. And he's like, I think you'll really enjoy this book. And for whatever reason, I probably would, but it just did not rise to the top of the queue of all the books that I chose for myself to read. And then I had it for like 7 years. And I was like,
Right.
maybe I'm not going to read this book. Maybe someday I'll get it out of the library. And so like books that I'm like, I have books that I want to read and books that I like want to read, or books that like if I was a different person, I'd be like, I should read this. I want to learn this thing, but I don't really, if I'm being honest, think I'm going to read this book or on an infinite timeline. Yeah, I'd read all the books, but I don't have an infinite timeline. And so like, I think I either took a photo of the book and I'm just like, okay, I can remember it that way. But I honestly don't even know if I took a photo, but I remember the person, I remember the book, and I remember the experience more than if I had even read the book, probably. And like that happened to me with like, do you know there's this musician named Dan Byrne? He's wonderful. He's one of my favorites. He did a lot. You know the movie Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Oh, absolutely.
So he did a lot of he wrote a lot of the music for that movie. Like he's a folk singer, and he's really funny and smart and great. And I met him for the first time at this music club, this music venue called Club Passim in Harvard Square in the Boston area, which is a nonprofit. And so as a nonprofit, I volunteered to work the show that he was performing so that I could, hang out, get to see the show for free, help seat people, what have you. And I got to meet him backstage. And I was an aspiring, at the time, musician. I was not yet doing comedy, I don't think. But I had a CD that I'd made of like my songs and like a few jokes here and there. And I gave him my CD. And he was like, oh, thank you. I should give you something. And I was like, ooh, maybe he'll give me one of his CDs, which cost money and were much more valuable than the one that I burned myself. And he reached into his bag and pulled out a tiny bottle of whiskey that he had gotten either on the plane or in the mini fridge at the hotel, and he's like, here you go. And I'm like, at the time, I'd never drunk whiskey. I didn't really drink alcohol, but I was like, I was like, it was a gift, the giving of like, wow, Dan Byrne whiskey. Dan Byrne gave me this, and I put it in my bag, and I was like, wow, this is so great. Cut to like, I don't know the exact amount of time later. It could be several years later. It could be several months later.
You got a DUI. with the bottle. Okay. All right.
It better.
That would be a great punchline.
Yeah, I mean, I got called to jury duty. I head into the courthouse, and I go through a metal detector. I put my bag on, the X-ray machine, and then this woman at the other end is just holding up the whiskey bottle, like, "Sir,
Now that's actually worse.
And I was like, no, that's not drinking whiskey. That's memorial whiskey. That's Dan Byrne memorial whiskey. And she's like, sir, you can't have this. And she's like, was like winking and like smiling and throwing it in the garbage. And I'm like, no, my Dan Byrne whiskey. And here's the thing is like, whether or not I have that whiskey, like, means almost nothing. My life today is almost identical to if I still had that whiskey in my freezer. Like, I eventually met a friend. I have a friend now I met later who has played in bands with Dan Byrne and introduced me to Dan Byrne and brought him to do my podcast. And so I got to talk to Dan Byrne about this story, about the first time that we met, and he gave me this whiskey. I assume that I told him the story. I don't even remember if I told him this. Like, there's so many levels to but the point is, like, the experience is the experience, and the fact whether I have an artifact or not doesn't matter. And in fact, this one, both of these stories, this book and that whiskey, I think I remember more because I don't have them, because they are out of my life now.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Well, I had a little bit of an anecdote, but also this whole time I thought we were talking about David Byrne. And
I thought so too
I
for
was
a
like,
second.
oh, yeah, I know
But then
David
when you
Byrne.
mentioned- yeah.
And I was like,
Dan
man, Mike knows David
B-E-R-N.
Byrne?
Yeah. Close.
This guy sounds great, too. I did real quick.
Yes.
One time I was due to a sketch show we were doing. I had some like props in my backpack, and I was going through. I had gotten a public urination ticket, so I was going through the courthouse to go to pay my ticket or whatever. And I put the bag through security, and I had like a knife in there, like a butter knife, because I kept getting locked out of my apartment, and I would have to like jimmy the lock. So they pulled that out, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, whatever. It was just, I got stuck. And then she pulled out
my
just
butter.
a prop. Then she just pulled out a prop gun in the bag. And I just remember, I think verbatim, she just went, oh, come on. She held it up. And I was just like, you can take it, you can have it. And then we moved on. But anyway, that was just your story reminded.
That is so funny. Do you tell that on stage? You should.
Yeah, you should.
I should, yeah. I should, at least on Zoom shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to add briefly just on signing things after shows, etc., is that Zach witnessed what I thought was the funniest thing I'd ever done, and then the story, something was added to it, and just really briefly, when Facebook Marketplace was a thing, like a brand new thing, and I was moving apartments, instead of getting rid of any of my books, I had really old headshots. So as a joke, I just wrote, if anyone would like a signed Dan Wilbur headshot, I will, write it to you. I will write a special message to you, and I will sell it to you for $5. I will ship it to you. And somebody, like multiple people bought them, and I wrote, thank you for the money, Dan Wilbur. And like,
That's
I
very
thought,
funny.
an extremely funny thing to do. And then we were at a show, and I did the set. And I'm standing in what was the green room bar area with Zach and Lizzie Kaplan. Lizzie Kaplan. What am I saying? Lizzie Cassidy. I would see that was David Byrne. This guy comes up and he goes, "Hey, I bought that headshot of yours." But the funniest part of the story is that he kept saying, "I was in my office," and he was like, "I was in my office. Should I buy this douchebag's photo?" Like he kept insulting me, and I was like, "This was just a funny thing I did." And he was like, "Yeah." I kept telling my boss, I was like, "I'm gonna spend the money to get this dumbass's photo."
Wow.
Everyone was just watching. I was like, "Hey man, this was a good moment until right now." And
That's a bit like
it was
Threads.
beautiful. It was like Threads. He didn't get the joke.
Yeah,
And-
I mean, if that guy is looking for a coach, I have some advice for him.
Yes. Now, we are fully out of time, but if you want to say briefly that you came here to talk about a completely different obsession and we talked about advice columns instead, please let us know.
Have me back.
I'll have you back and you can
absolutely.
talk about acting.
Just started taking acting classes, loving it. I'll have even more to say about it in the future. But man, there's so much. Been taking in level 2, beginners level 2 at the Barrow Group. and just went to a musical yesterday with my mom and have looked at it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I was like, I see why the acting in this is different than other kinds of acting, which seems more natural. Tune in next time to Mike
Absolutely.
Kaplan on this show.
Yes. Mike, where can we find you in the world?
I'm here. Yeah.
Thanks.
So Mike Kaplan is spelled this weird way, MyQKaplan. If you search for that spelling of Mike Kaplan, you'll find it wherever you wish. For example, my comedy albums are on your various streaming services, Spotify's and Apple Music's and such. You can get my newsletter on Substack. That's at mikekaplan.substack.com. I share jokes. I also share like longer pieces, sort of analyzing jokes and philosophy in ways, and so that's a fun way to find out where I am. I share my dates in there as well. My dates are also on my website for my live shows, mikekaplan.com, and at Mike Kaplan on social media. So those are probably the best ways. I've got some specials on Amazon and Drybar. I have the book that I mentioned called Heartbrain Art Train. I have my podcast, which I'm not allowed to talk about because I know this is a podcast. You can't talk about other podcasts. But after you listen to all of this podcast, once you're done with that, you could listen to my podcast, which are called Broccoli and Ice Cream and The Faucet. And I either will or did have you on, and I want to have you both on. Unless I already did, then I don't.
We did Broccoli and Ice Cream.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But I'll have
great.
you again. I'll have you for the first time. It's going to be great. Those are, here's one final thing. Somebody once was searching for, I'm vegan, and then they're a vegan fan of mine. And I asked them after a show, like, how did you find me? And they said they went on looking for vegan recipes on Pinterest and accidentally searched for vegan recipes on Spotify. And I am what comes up if you search for vegan recipes on Spotify, apparently at that time, to that person. But I recommend looking for my name.
That's just
vegan
good.
recipes. Yeah.
That's good SEO. Spotify engine optimization.
Ooh.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
Thank you for having me. I love you guys. This is really fun.
Oh, thanks, Mike.
A big thank you to Mike Kaplan. We just want to say thank you for all the good advice, and thank you all for listening. You can find out more about Mike Kaplan on his website. You can listen to his Dry Bar special. You can listen to his podcast, CS2, The Faucet, and Broccoli and Ice Cream. And we are so happy he came. Zach, where can we find you?
Oh, what a great question. I am on Instagram at also ALSO Zach Sims. I am on the TikTok at Zach Sims Comedy. It's Sims with one M, just in case you need to know that. And you can see Dan and I each and every Wednesday at 7:30 at the stand-up comedy show We Have Fun at Young Ethel's in Park Slope. It is free. It is fun. Mike has done it several times. Dan, where can we find you?
You can find me
I ask you.
at Dan Wilbur Comedy on Instagram, TikTok. You can find me at Dan Wilbur, most other places. And you can find me every Wednesday night at Young Ethel's. Sometimes I perform. Sometimes I just sit at the bar. Who knows?
Yeah, sometimes Dan just sits and stares and wonders where it all went. Until next week, see ya, hobby holers!